Hey guys, thanks for making it on this webinar. We've got an exciting company to talk about. Probably one of the most exciting companies that I've seen in the last decade is called Cancer Check Labs, where we can detect cancer early and most importantly, save lives. Now, what's interesting about this is going to be the first time people will have access to get equity into this company via a convertible note. And this is going to be a pretty interesting presentation. So I hope you guys are ready. We want to get some disclaimers out of the way first. Regulatory and medical advice disclaimer in the first slide. And also, we will have forward-looking statements. So we have the disclaimer here. We will be talking about future projections. So as you know, cancer affects a lot of people, and almost everybody on here, I'm sure, knows somebody that has gotten cancer before. In fact, there's 20 million new cancer cases globally as of a few years ago. And 70% of these cancer deaths are from types that don't have effective screening at an early stage. So, for example, one of my friends just a year and a half ago died of pancreatic cancer. There is no real good screen for that. Ovarian and lung cancer sometimes get caught at very late stages where nothing can be done. Also, these late stage treatments create a huge problem for healthcare. It costs up to 4 times more than early intervention to actually treat these cancers once they're caught at a late stage. And the current screening, which you have your colonoscopies, you have your mammograms, they're not perfect. They miss a lot of deadly cancers, and a lot of these tests are invasive and limited in scope. So more on statistics, if you're a man on this presentation, and if you look to your left, if there's somebody else there with you, one of y'all two will most likely get cancer. And it's going to be 1 in 3 women. If you look to your left and your right, if none of them are going to get cancer in their lifetime, it's probably going to be you. So there's a lot of people that are getting this, but people don't know how high it is. And it happens to be the #1 cause of mortality in developed countries and twice as frequent as cancer deaths, as heart disease. About 40% of people will develop some form of cancer, it's approaching half the people. And the most interesting thing is, although a lot of people right now are focused on research for cancer treatments, like waiting till after somebody develops cancer, if you spend more time looking at survival rate when you're detecting it early at stage 0, there's up to 99% survival rate, which is where Cancer Check Labs comes in. There's also a huge market for this too. So this is the opportunity where not only do you have the possibility of getting a large return on your investment, you're also helping people because right now there's $100 billion global cancer diagnostics market that's growing. Also, if we just look at the early detection segment of that, this is about 1/5 of the market. $20 billion is focused just on solid tumors, which is what we're focused on. And initially, our first milestone will be to just get 5% penetration of the US market in 5 years, which we believe is very feasible. And there's some issues with today's standards. Let's say if you want to get screened for multiple cancers, what do you have? Almost all these individual cancers have some other way of testing it or no real testing. The closest that people have right now is using ctDNA, which are bits and scraps of DNA molecules in a blood test, mainly from a company called Grail Gallery. You guys may have heard of them. Unfortunately, it's almost like flipping a coin when they say that you have cancer. So they have up close to a 57% false positive rate. So imagine you take this test and it says, yeah, you have cancer. Well, half the time they're wrong, and you're going to be worried and spending a lot of money on other invasive tests. So that's the big problem right here is the false negative and false positive problems, and also the false negative problems with Grail Gallery. They had some data showing that based on clinical staging, the test that they have is detecting about 3% of stage 1 tumors. And our goal is to detect early, right? Only 5% of stage 2 and only 15% of stage 3 tumors, but 82% of stage 4. So it's really not a good test for early detection, and it really fails to detect the minimum residual disease. It just doesn't have the dynamics that you really need right now for our current population. And there is a solution of moving away from just imaging and just the current standards and getting bits and scraps of DNA. That's why we have Sumit Rai on here, who's the CEO and founder of Cancer Check Labs. I'm going to turn it over to Sumit to talk about the solution that he's come up with over the last decade and a half.
Thank you, Amir. Thanks for that introduction. Over the last 15 years, we developed a technology that Cancer Check Labs is using exclusively. That technology enables us to extract what are known as circulating tumor cells, or CTCs, from a blood sample at scale. So if you have an underlying solid tumor, which is any organ tumor, breast cancer, lung, colorectal, pancreatic, liver, bladder, brain, esophageal, gastric, thyroid, adrenal, so on and so forth, the primary tumor itself generally does not kill you. What kills you is the tumor sheds tumor cells that circulate through your bloodstream, known as circulating tumor cells, or CTCs, as mentioned earlier. And those CTCs spread the cancer in your body in a process known as metastasis. And the metastatic effects make your biological organs shut down, become dysfunctional, and you die. That's typically how you die from cancer, not from this lump. Now, CTCs begin shedding very early in a tumor's life. Because it is the mechanism of metastasis, the spread of cancer, you cannot go from really stage 0 to stage 1, or 1 to 2, or 2 to 3, or 3 to 4, so on and so forth, without CTCs being spread into the blood. So what we do is we take a 40 milliliter sample, which is about 4 vials. It's half of what you would do in an annual physical typically. And from that sample, we process it with our technology to extract those circulating tumor cells. Now, the presence or absence of those cells is indicative of cancer. Healthy blood does not have CTCs. It does not appear in healthy blood samples. It does not spontaneously appear. So if we detect CTCs in that sample, they need to have a source and origin, which means they were shed from some underlying solid tumor, which indicates a problem. Now, what's different about this and what's special about this is that we are capturing the whole entire cell, which is cellular tissue, such that we can physically and tangibly place it on a glass slide, just like a tissue biopsy. We can stain it just like a tissue biopsy. We put it in the palm of a pathologist, a physician trained to examine tissue, just like a tissue biopsy, to look at it under a microscope and output a board-certified pathology report. We currently have over 100 practices signed up. We are scaling out quickly. We launched the test in June of last year. It's only been in the market for a few months, not even a year now. And we are looking to expand the sales, marketing, and commercialization efforts throughout the market so we can detect more cancer early and save more lives. Because all solid tumors shed CTCs in order to spread, that results in this being a broad spectrum pan-cancer solid tumor screen. As a result, we can detect over 200 types of solid tumor types and subtypes. And again, CTCs are cellular tissue, so we are looking at tangible material. We are not looking at little scripts and scraps of the genome, little bits and scripts of DNA that itself is just a scrap of the cell. That is like trying to identify a car with tire scraps. If you want to identify the car, you need the whole car, which is why you need the whole cell. And we do it following protocols that are the gold standard in all standard of care protocols, which is having a pathologist actually look at the tissue, which are those cells that we extract from that blood sample. These cells look very different than healthy cells. Typically, they are much larger. They can be 30, 40 microns instead of 8 or 10. Typically, they are multinucleated. They have 5, 6 nuclei or heads rather than 1 or 2. Because they're so heavily nucleated, they have high NC ratios, which means nuclear to cytoplasmic ratios. That basically means the nuclei comprise 80, 90% of the cell rather than 15 or 20. And they just have distorted features. They look weird. They're alien-like cells. Again, these CTCs being messed up, dangerous, malignant, cancerous, aberrant cells are still cells, have the components of a cell, and by capturing the whole cell, we get the whole picture. for a pathologist to be able to look at and make a determination. Other tests in the market use things like ctDNA, as Amir was mentioning earlier. Those, again, are just scraps of one piece of the cell genome and just scraps of that itself. And once again, you cannot identify an entire cell or a tumor cell with just scraps of a cell. And that is why those tests have those problems with very low detection rates because they're using little scraps. They don't have signal, and that's why they have a hard time detecting early cancers. And that is also why they have high false positive rates because they have to use machines in order to amplify the signal. And that amplification causes the DNA to mutate, which results in those high false positive rates that Amir referenced earlier. And then and in using ctDNA in tests like GRAIL and Cologuard, you're unable to actually look at any tissue. So the way they're doing this is they're using a machine to kick out the result as opposed to using a pathologist to examine tissue. So what we've done here is we've developed a test that is an early cancer screen for all solid tumors that uses the gold standard of tissue-based pathology. We recently published some case studies in a paper demonstrating even that we can detect stage 0 cancer from a blood sample. That was published with Christus Health System, which is one of the 20 largest healthcare systems in the United States. They have 600 hospitals and clinics. It was also co-published by CBCC, Comprehensive Blood and Cancer Center, which is the largest private cancer center on the West Coast. This test is based on technology that we developed over the last 15 years in a technology company, and we have the only federally registered, compliant, and certified lab in the entire world that can offer this test. It is also the only lab that has access to that technology. How it works is there's a kit. That kit is sent out to the patient. You can buy it direct to consumer on our website. We are available across the entire continental United States, except New York, where we're working on our final state license, and we're in the last step of that. In that kit is everything you need, the vials for a blood draw. And the way that you have your blood draw done is there are 3 options. A, we have partnerships with 4,000 mobile phlebotomists across the country. Those are people that will come to your doorstep, your home or office, and draw your blood for you. It takes 5 minutes. In that kit is also a FedEx prepaid priority label. Can we cut that? Let's go back. We have partnerships with 4,000 mobile phlebotomists. These are people that will come to your doorstep, pull the blood, and be able to take that kit, pack it up, and send it back to us with a prepaid FedEx priority label that's already in the kit for overnight delivery to our lab in Medical District in Dallas. The second option is we have an enterprise partnership with Any Lab Test Now. They have about 230 locations across the United States. You can walk into their locations, they will pull your blood, they will pack it up, and again, they will FedEx it to us with the prepaid FedEx priority label over to our lab the next morning in Medical District in Dallas. And the third way to pull your blood is you can, of course, go to your practitioner, your doctor, your nurse, and they can pull your blood for you, and you can send it to us. As I mentioned earlier, there's about 100 practices signed up right now. We're looking to expand that dramatically. We are also looking to expand internationally. The business model is that we sell the kits for $1,695 to these practices that then use it for their patients. That's our B2B model. And then the direct to consumer on the website is we sell it for $1,995. We're projecting about 50,000 tests by 2027. That should result in about $80 million in revenue. The real inflection point for this, when it becomes very, very large, is when we go for standard of care. Over the next couple years, as we build a business, we are going to do more studies. Those studies, we are going to publish more data. As we publish the data, we believe that we will be able to achieve standard of care and reimbursement. Once we achieve reimbursement, we expect this to grow by orders of magnitude exponentially. And so our projections for 2028, at which point we believe we will be able to get to standard of care, are about $12 billion for 2029 in revenue. We have a very strong management team. Most of us have worked together in the past, over the past few decades at various companies. I'm obviously one of the founders, the CEO and chairman. My co-founder is Denny Cahan. He has 30 years of experience, much of which is in C-suite positions at healthcare organizations, at Jackson Healthcare, which was the largest healthcare organization in the state of Georgia. He's a serial entrepreneur. Our CFO, Jim Chardella, has almost 40 years of experience. He had 20 years of public audit experience and 20 years of C-suite experience running medical device companies. We've worked together in the past as well. He actually came out of retirement to join our company, and he will be participating in the same round and intends to put in between $1 to $2 million personally in the convertible note. Our Chief Marketing Officer, Lara Mahana, has been in digital media, mobile media, and various marketing roles for the past 20 years. We've known each other for about 2 decades. Dr. Raj Athariwala just joined us as an advisor. Some of you may know him. He's the founder of Prenuvo, which is the MRI scan that's being used right now, and a lot of that's for cancer detection. We are discussing creating an alternative and a superior machine to Prenuvo together, because Prenuvo right now does not have the appropriate resolution, and we believe we can build a better machine to pair with our blood test, which is very exciting, because once you get a positive on our test, the next step is to go into imaging. And Dr. Carlos Torres is our laboratory director. He's a forensic pathologist and has extensive experience. And then Dr. Arunbala Kumaran is a very well-known person in both oncology and hematology. He is a Merck Distinguished Scientist when he was at Merck. He is one of the people that worked on Keytruda, which is the only broad-spectrum cancer drug in the world. He also has published over 40 peer-reviewed publications, been at NIH, and I can go on and on. We're receiving an enormous amount of press because of the nature of this. It is a disruptive breakthrough in cancer and will move outcomes. Last year alone, there were 10 million recorded deaths in cancer. Over the course of 100 years, that is 1 billion lives lost, double-digit percentages of global population. There are not many things on the planet that actively threaten double-digit percentages of global population. If you can detect cancer at stage 0, as we have demonstrated that we can, you are talking about saving 1 billion lives in just 100 years. To put that in perspective, in the history of the world, if you were to add up all known fatalities from all known wars in human history, the total is only about 350 million. We are talking about an impact on the world and on life and humanity that is 3 times of that, potentially in just 100 years. And as a result, Rogan has talked about us with some of our partners. Tucker Carlson has talked about us. I've been on Fox News, CW, ABC Evening News, American Medicine Today, and we continue to receive enormous amounts of press, are being invited continuously to speak at the main stage of many of the conferences in functional medicine and anti-aging, so on and so forth. Amir,
And guys, I was going to mention also, we talked to a lot of doctors here in Dallas and at conferences that were here in Dallas. There have been a lot of people that they're doctors that come in 2 different camps, I would say. There's some that are offering Grail and some that are not offering anything because they know that Grail has high false positives, right? Every doctor that we've talked to that is using Grail, once they see our test, it's 100% conversion. It's a no-brainer to them. And these people have been actively looking for something like this. And then there's another camp, doctors that want to offer something like this, especially concierge medicine doctors, functional medicine doctors, and primary care, but they don't know that there's anything that's available like the test that we have. And so that's really nice that we're getting such great feedback from physicians that have been looking for an answer. Now they have it, and we're getting 100% conversion to our product, which makes this really exciting, an exciting opportunity to get in pretty much right at the inflection point, because Sumit's been working on this technology for more than a decade, and we're coming in at the tail end right before this this opportunity skyrockets, and it's already nationwide. We're just getting even more market penetration. So the opportunity today is, it's a $5 million opportunity. It's not a large allocation, but this is what we have for us at a $100 million cap, which means that the peak valuation for our equity. And we can, as you know, from looking at the news, if you look at what Grail was acquired for, I believe it was around $8 billion, and other diagnostic or other screening tests out there like Cologuard are trading in the billions. But our goal is to either possibly get acquired by a diagnostic giant like Quest and LabCorp that are looking at us already. But the main goal, what we want to do is go public with this and get even more press and get some liquidity for our investors as well, probably within 2 to 4 years. And if this is something that you're interested in, just to let you know, this is a first come, first serve basis type of investment. We do already have some people that have said they wanted to put in $1 million, but right now we don't have the paperwork finalized. So that's why we're looking for soft commitments due here by March 25th. And priority is always given to people that invested with me in the past. But definitely, if you're interested, you can contact me. All you guys probably already have my contact information. We also have Encore, who's the head of capital partnerships for Balut Capital. His email and phone number is there as well. And I'm getting a couple messages right now for some questions. So we'll have a few minutes for questions before we wrap this up. Some of these questions looks like I can answer. We have somebody on here right now that's asking, is it possible to invest from their IRA? The answer is yes, if you have converted your money to a self-directed custodian. So that could be somebody like Inspira or Alto. If you want names of some of those, you can let me know. But basically, the process is the custodian will fill out part of the paperwork on the investment, and then the custodian will send the wires into our fund. And then basically, it's like your IRA is the owner of the equity. But that's a good question because there are some things that IRAs do not allow. Then another question, is there a maximum amount that somebody could put in? In general, we don't like any one person to be more than 20% of what's allocated. So that basically, in my mind, that puts a cap at 1 million. So even if you get a group of people, I know some of you guys have investment clubs and buddies that invest together. If you brought them in together, the max we would give any one unit or entity would be $1 million for that reason. Let me see what other questions we have here. Well, this one I just answered. Somebody was asking if they could share the presentation with other people that might be interested. I would say reach out to me and Encore, unless I would rather just talk to them separately and do the presentation so they get a chance to answer questions or have their questions answered just like you guys are right now. See another question here. Okay, so somebody had a question. This one's more for you, Sumit. They wanted a little bit more explanation on the cancer tumor cell detection method versus what other people are doing right now. For example, we didn't talk too much about Cologuard, but how are we different again, if you could summarize that from currently what is out there?
Yeah, so there's substantial advantages to the way that we do it. So first of all, our specificity is nearly perfect. And what that means is we don't generate false positives. False positives are dangerous. False positives are dangerous because they result in costly and unnecessary interventions, surgical tissue biopsies, colonoscopies, radiation scans, even treatment at times. The reason that we don't generally generate any false positives is because we're actually looking at the whole cells. And as I mentioned earlier, those cells are highly aberrant and atypical. You know, they're bigger, they're multinucleated, they have these weird NC ratios, they're hyperchromatic, they have too much DNA because they have so many nuclei. And so the first thing is we believe it's a much safer test because we're not going to give you a false positive result. When you're dealing with tests like Cologuard and Grail and anything else that's based on scraps of DNA, they have to amplify that DNA in order to generate enough signal to detect it. That amplification is typically done with a technique called PCR. PCR is something that's usually used for viral amplification. So let's say you got pricked in a hospital and you needed a rapid HIV test. There's not enough HIV signal, so they use PCR to amplify it to detect it sooner. The same thing they did with COVID. And so that's fine for a whole intact viral organism. But when you apply PCR to DNA scraps, DNA is highly unstable. And as a result, you will mutate it. And when you mutate it, that's what results in all their false positives. So that's the first problem they have, and that's the one big advantage that we have is that we don't. Second, we are looking at tissue. These are whole intact cells, cellular tissue, physically on glass slides. None of those other tests are able to extract tissue. They are just looking at little signal from the DNA, putting them in a black box, applying a set of mystical algorithms, AI, artificial intelligence, ML, machine learning, NGS, next generation sequencing, some computational processing to extrapolate and guess whether or not they have a tumor cell. We don't guess. We actually take out the whole cells for a pathologist to look at, which is why we are the only ones that are able to output a board certified pathology tissue biopsy report. And then on the sensitivity side, in terms of detecting it, again, because they're using these little scripts and scraps and bits and pieces of DNA, they don't have much signal. And that's why those early detection rates that Amir showed with you are so dismal for those other products. There's nothing there for them to really detect. We, on the other hand, are looking at these whole intact cells that are shed in the millions, even at stage 0. If you have 1 gram of tumor mass, let's say breast cancer as an example, 1 gram is not palpable. You cannot feel it. In fact, 1 gram is so small, they will often refuse to biopsy because they will either miss or they will not procure enough tissue. And if you can't biopsy, you can't diagnose it. So 1 gram, which is not palpable, which is not biopsiable, which is not diagnosable, kicks off up to about 3.2 million CTCs a day into your bloodstream. And that is at stage 0, and that is why we tend to detect it. So our test has extremely superior sensitivity because of its mechanism of action. It has superior specificity, meaning we don't generate false positives because we actually look at the weird aberrant cells, and we try to follow and do follow gold standard protocols of pathology where you're actually looking at the tissue on a slide by a board certified pathologist.
Along those same lines, another question came in, which is almost like a follow-up to what this one. Let's say somebody does have a positive test after taking the Cancer Check Labs test, then what will be the next steps for that patient?
The next step for that patient is typically imaging, right? If the test is going to return you a positive or negative. Once it does, you know there's a problem if you find the positive, right? Because again, healthy blood doesn't have CTC, circulating tumor cells. So if we find those in your blood sample, they came from somewhere, and then we want to go and look for where that comes from. Now, once we do the imaging, there's different outcomes that can occur. Hopefully, best case scenario, you actually don't find it on imaging. And that means we detected it very early at the cellular level. Imaging today cannot detect at the cellular level. It doesn't have the resolution. There aren't enough pixels. You have billions of cells. You don't have billions of pixels. And so we do detect at the cellular level because we are looking at those cells. And so that's number one. Number two, if we detect it at stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4, then you have choices of how you want to treat it. You can go through traditional medicine and oncology. You can use functional medicine protocols. Some people will go naturopathic. Some people will go homeopathic. Some people will use combinations. But that's a decision that you're going to make yourself with your physician and treating provider.
What also got me interested in Cancer Check Labs is basically with the introduction of Cancer Check Labs, we're basically going to be rewriting how cancer is screened throughout the whole world, and not just on the screening side. But imagine if you do have cancer, and let's say you get a lumpectomy for breast cancer, or you have some prostate surgery, remove the cancer from the prostate. Well, we're also going to be probably rewriting the rules on surveillance. How are we making sure that it doesn't recur? Sumit, you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so today we really talked about this test in the context of screening a presumed healthy patient, sort of population screening to detect cancer early. The same test can be used on the other side of the fence, which is you had cancer, you were treated. Well, if you were treated, you've eradicated all your tumor mass, then there should not be anything any longer shedding CTCs into your bloodstream, and you should have a clean screen. And so post-treatment, some of the applications here are also what are known as MRD, which is checking for minimum residual disease, i.e., is there any tumor mass left? If there isn't, then there shouldn't be anything shedding and you should have a clean screen. Or even if they did get all the tumor mass out during your treatment, has it grown back and recurred, which again would result in CTCs being shed into the blood. So we can use it for population screening, which is where we focused. But in the future, we intend to also move into oncology, where they can use it post-treatment to make sure that patients are healthy after their treatment, all their tumor mass has been eradicated, and that the tumor is not recurring.
Got it. As we have time for one more question. Somebody had some questions about, or they're asking to explain if there's a CPT code for a standard of care reimbursement in the next few years, how is it that the revenue can be so much higher versus doing the cash-based test right now?
Right. So in cash pay, obviously you're dealing with the higher end of the income demographic, the top 5 to 10% of the population. And so that's going to limit your penetration downstream, which is why at this time we are going broad rather than deep. And what that means is we're expanding across the US. There are 47 of 48 continental states we're available in. The only state we're not at the moment is New York, where we're completing our final step, which is getting the inspection scheduled and done. And we are expanding internationally. We've already opened Canada. We just signed a deal with 140 clinics in the UK that will draw blood for us, both fixed phlebotomy at their locations, as well as dispatch mobile phlebotomists. We have signed an international deal, a global deal with FedEx, and we are looking at that expansion across the world because we're going cash pay at the top end of the demographic. As time goes on and as we collect more data and as we work towards reimbursement with insurance companies and Medicare and CPT codes become available, that opens up essentially standard of care. Once standard of care opens up, I mean, in the US alone, you have 44 million annual physicals a year. Most of those are people over 40. 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds typically aren't getting annual physicals. So you've got about 40 million physicals a year. If you had standard of care and reimbursement where everyone could have that test at their annual physical and it was paid for by insurance, I would estimate that at a minimum, you would penetrate 25% of that market quickly, which is about 10 million tests a year. So even if the price of the test came down to, let's say, $1,250 at reimbursement, at 10 million tests a year, that's $12.5 billion in revenue. So what we're going to do here is we're going to establish the business, we're going to create the awareness, we're going to collect the data, we're going to work towards doing the studies to get into standard of care and build those CPT and reimbursement codes. And once we achieve that, I expect to see exponential growth by orders of magnitude because of the volume.
That makes a lot of sense to me. So guys, thanks for being on this presentation. Sumit, thanks for taking time out to explain some of the intricacies of this test.
Sure.
And if you guys have any questions, reach out to me or Encore. We're going to have the paperwork ready here any day now. And just reach out with any questions. We couldn't get to everybody now, but let's talk later on after this presentation. And glad you guys made it. We'll talk to you later.
Thank you, everyone.